I'm Dana Denha, and you're watching FYI. Affordable housing in Ann Arbor has been a hot topic for years, and the Housing Commission has been working diligently to create places for people of lower income levels to have a place to call home. Currently, the Commission has 10 locations they are developing to create affordable housing throughout the city. Learn about one of these new developments in the early stages and how the community can have input and support this worthy project.
We are building an affordable housing project on the corner of Catherine and 4th Avenue. It is in the historically black business district and historically black neighborhood. And so we wanted to honor and celebrate that history, invite people who lived in this neighborhood in the past and live in this neighborhood now to help us do the design, in particular, of what happens on the first floor.
Back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of this was vibrant, African American owned businesses and residents. And so today we talk about this project and kind of how it correlates to history and incorporating that history and paying homage to those who've come before us.
We are losing our black history, and I want an avenue where we can hang on to it and talk about it and let other people in Ann Arbor that either coming or going understand that there is a history here.
The West Side ultimately became a black community, and for generations and generations, because there was nowhere else that we could live. So when I say we, I'm talking about the community. And we bought houses, we had businesses, thriving businesses over on Ann Street, homes throughout this region for black people.
So we know we're going to have housing on the upper floors, but we want to know, what does this community want for the first floor that would be a benefit to the community.
This has never been done before. This is the first time ever that we've been included in anything that's going to be built for low-income housing.
You can kind of get that neighborhood feel. You can kind of be able to be a part of it, remember when. And there may be a piece of remember when that we can bring back now and help incorporate that into this project.
To have a voice in the affordable housing crisis, visit HUGov.org/department/housing for upcoming meetings on new developments. Stay tuned, and we'll be back with more in exactly 30 seconds. We all know the importance of the written word. The benefits of reading fact or fiction are tremendous. But what about the art of storytelling? A local group is keeping this tradition alive as they ignite a passion for the art during their annual performances.
For 27 years, the Ann Arbor Storytelling Guild has brought imagination to life.
We're having a family storytelling concert for children 4 and under and some over.
Everybody's a storyteller because everybody has a story.
2 of the stories are folk tales from other countries, and then we have one original tale that's a puppet story also.
One day there was a dinosaur who...
There's a mastery involved with weaving a tale.
It's a tradition of telling stories, just like people go to movies, they go to singing concerts, and now it's a word-of-mouth storytelling.
I wanted to find a story that would excite them, they would understand it, and that would give them a little education.
Having a beginning, having a middle, and having an end makes a good story. And a story that connects with people. So you pick a story that you enjoy yourself and that you enjoy telling to people. It's just something that keeps the oral tradition alive. And that's a good way to come to these Storyfests.
The Storytellers Guild will be hosting 2 upcoming events. The Storyfest Adult Concert is October 8th at 7 p.m. at Trinity Lutheran Church. And the Storyfest Family Fun Concert is October 9th at 2 p.m. at the AADL Pittsfield branch. For more, visit AnnArborStorytelling.org. We all love good eats on the grill and a warm campfire. But before you ignite those flames, there's some need-to-know safety info. Learn more in this month's City Roundup in 60.
Hi, my name is Mike Kennedy. I'm the fire chief for the Ann Arbor Fire Department, here today to talk about fire safety. We have a lot of information on the city website, a2gov.org/fire, for both grilling safety along with outdoor fireplace safety. For grilling safety, we recommend keeping grills at least 10 feet away from a structure. If you have hot coals, never throw them into the trash. That can cause a fire. And for outdoor fire safety, you can't have campfires in the city of Ann Arbor. They have to be 25 feet from a structure. You are also allowed to have portable fireplaces. Those have to be 15 feet from a structure. You need to make sure that they're tended at all times and they're completely extinguished before you leave. There's some additional guidance and requirements that are available on the city website. Please go there, check it out. If you have any other questions, please let us know. We're happy to answer.
As we heard earlier in the show, the housing crisis is real and in need of solutions. But there's more to the topic, like food insecurity and the educational gap for those living below the median income level. There is an organization here to assist those in need. Community Action Network, or CAN, envisions closing those socioeconomic gaps. Joining me is Derrick Miller, Executive Director of CAN Washtenaw. Welcome to the show, Derrick.
Thank you for having me.
Can you just sort of explain what CAN is and what you do for the community to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So CAN is currently managing 7 community centers located in under-resourced communities throughout Washtenaw County. We focus on education, housing stabilization, and community building. And so we're providing things like after-school programs, educational summer camps, food security. We're the largest food partner with food gatherers. We do actually about 8% of their inventory, and all of our sites do have food distributions as well as pantries, as well as eviction prevention, utility shutoff prevention services, and last but not least, in our community building, lots of community events, so back to school barbecues, holiday parties, Thanksgiving potlucks, community cleanups, and resident council meetings, and a few other things.
How long has the organization been around and how has it grown in its time?
Yeah, so CAN actually started in 1987 by a resident of the Highcombe community, which is one of the Ann Arbor Housing Commission's public housing sites. And over the years, my predecessor in 2002 started kind of what we internally call CAN 2.0. And at that time, added Green Baxter Court. And then I started in 2008, and at that time, started managing Bryant and Northside Community Center. And then now today, as executive director, we have the 7 sites, so the 4 that I've already mentioned, as well as Creekside Court Community Center, Arrowwood Hills Community Center, and Brick Community Center.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what led you to working with this organization, and how you became the executive director?
Yeah, happy to. So service, for whatever reason, was always in my blood, in some shape or form. Even back in high school, I was a student representative all 4 years. I think part of it started too because my mom is actually from Columbia, and we would often visit Columbia and get a really unique experience that was pretty much in contrast to my typical upbringing as well. And so certainly some humbling aspects as well as like eye-opening aspects to that experience. And then decided to, when I was going to start with college, wanted to mix things up a little bit, and decided to go in the Marine Corps concurrently with my college degree. And I ended up doing a tour of service during that time. And then eventually teaching became like a passion for me, and started teaching. And then shortly thereafter, ended up working at CAN and didn't look back since.
Why don't you talk about, when you go on the website, you see all these stats and stuff like that. What is the ALICE threshold and how does it affect this area?
Yeah, so the Alice threshold, it essentially helps us determine that where you may be earning some level of income, but it's just not enough to really make it through the cost of living, particularly in these times when inflation is really having a huge impact. And it's not, it's actually very impactful, particularly in the nonprofit community. Perhaps maybe talk a little bit about that later. And actually, like one of the data points that we've noticed is that in our food programs, more than half of the folks that are coming through for our food programs are either retired or have some form of income, either part-time, full-time. And so there's like this myth that, using food security programs and things like that is people that aren't working or are on, some type of government subsidy. And that's actually not true, at least for our food program participants.
Tell us a little bit more about the food program and maybe some of the stats on the food insecurity in this area, because that's a big deal. I mean, to have to decide between like, am I going to eat tonight or am I going to pay my rent kind of situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's no shortage of that kind of triage going on. It is also reflective of the interconnectedness of the support services that exist in our community. And so in kind of simple terms, it means that if all you're doing is shifting a resource from one area to another area, yeah, you might see some differences or impacts and things like that, but you're also going to see some negative impacts in some other areas as a result, and that they also do affect each other as well. And so in terms of food security, we actually peaked in June of 2020 at about 250% capacity. Essentially, when the shutdown happened, we anticipated, and rightly so, that our food security numbers were going to go up, and they shot up pretty much double overnight when that happened. And it's kept going up to about 250%. And slowly but surely had been coming back down, except for it never really stopped dropping below 200%. And so we continue to operate at that level, which over time is certainly causing significant constraints on our resources and things of that nature. And then on top of that, with the food security challenges currently in our community, and certainly this is a national trend as well, is that there's a tremendous amount of supply chain challenges. One of the things that I help kind of for people to get a gauge on how things are going with food security supports that are out there. If you're going into a grocery store and you notice that there's a lot of shelves still partially, stocked or empty or what have you, it is now exponentially worse for the food banks and the food programs that are out there as well. And so, although I think many people feel like we're outside of the pandemic crisis, in practice in the nonprofit sector, I would argue things are actually even more challenging now than they were a year ago. And food security is definitely one of those areas where we get a lot of sampling of need because the frequency in which people need to come to replenish for food supports.
So you have like a food pantry that people can go to. How does that work?
Yeah. So 6 of our sites we'd call or 5 of our sites we'd call closed sites. So they're for the specific neighborhoods that we are operating, and CAN's programs and services tend to focus on very specific neighborhoods. There's 2 exceptions. There's the Northside Community Center food program. That one's actually operated by Catholic Social Services. And then there's ours that's operated at Bryant Community Center. And both of those serve the entire county. And frankly, even if we get people from outside of the county, they're going to get food. So when they do arrive, basically we get a little bit of data gathering that goes on. But even if, like, let's say they don't have a driver's license or something like that, they're still going to get food as well. It just helps us in terms of not only reporting, but also helping to encourage our broader population to be able to contribute more in food resources and things like that. And that data piece is just so important. And then ultimately they're getting food based on the size of their household. There was a period where we were not limiting the frequency of visits. Unfortunately, because of supply chain issues that we've run into, we've had to do that. And more specifically, meat is one of those areas that has been in a very acute challenge as well. And it's something that is not local issue. So for example, like Food Gathers is the main food supplier and procurer. The challenges are much broader challenges in terms of procurement of of meat products, and some of it actually had to do with some federal changes with the USDA program that curtailed the amount of meat products. And so there's been occasions where we would normally receive, let's say at our Bryant Community Center, 5 to 7 pallets worth of food, and sometimes it might be 2 or 3. But it's still 100 and 150 people that are there waiting to get food, and those supply disruptions have a real impact on our families.
When you don't have something like meat, is there some like sort of substitute, or do you try to help people sort of figure it out without those products that you're used to having in your kitchen?
So Food Gathers does a really good job of having a very diverse inventory. And actually, just about a couple weeks ago, they made an announcement to all the partners that receive what are called carrot credits, which are basically currency that we can purchase off of their inventory, and that they provide these free of charge. And with those carrot credits, they actually doubled them for our agencies to be able to help kind of address these ongoing challenges that are coming in with our supply. And it actually puts them on track for $1 million deficit. And so they are also putting like some real, resources as well as effort to try to stem off as much of this impact. They do acknowledge that these supply chain issues are anticipated to go on for at least a couple years, as are a lot of different types of supply chain issues that are going on.
When you donate to CAN or Food Gatherers, do they go together? I mean, like can you donate food, or do you just take monetary donations?
We do take food. There is kind of this aspect of efficiency. So Food Gatherers, for example, is really good at procurement and distribution, as well as like the vetting of the product and things like that. And so I tend to encourage if you're going to donate foods and things like that, to certainly go through Food Gatherers. And to some degree, like donations that go to Food Gatherers may end up as like carrot credits and things like that as a resource for our agency as well. We also do procure some of our own food, as well as we do meals and snacks with our kids in our after school programs year round. And that certainly has, if you can imagine, filling the bellies of many elementary and teenagers in particular. It really eats a huge hole in our budget.
They're hungry all the time.
Very much so.
Well, talk about some of these after school programs that you have. What are they? How do you get involved in them? What is the criteria for a kid to get involved in these programs?
Yeah, so in terms of that last question, to keep it real simple, is like if you live in the neighborhood that we're providing services, you're eligible for the programs and services that we're offering. And we don't have any other kind of bells and whistles or criteria that is necessary. And just as a general operation, we really truly try to eliminate as many barriers as possible. And so we also don't charge for anything that we do as well, which also means that we are very dependent on the broader community to provide resources, to volunteer, to donate. We have our holiday gift drive coming up here, where we typically gather around 1,200 gifts for kids in our communities. As well. And it truly is a take a village kind of approach to make all of these things happen. And so our after school programs, I would describe it by saying that it's not what you might think in terms of like a latchkey program. This is high level, high in depth supports for our kids. Every day it either includes meals and snacks, some academic support, homework support, but also things like social and emotional learning development. We have a lot of other academics that get woven in as well. There's our CAN Art and Design program that weaves in art and design within the program as well, and typically runs about 2.5 to 3 hours a day throughout the school year. And then during the summertime, we do 6 weeks, Monday through Thursday, for 7 hours a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with all the kids. And even during that time, the amount of enrichment that occurs is even much more robust.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It sounds like, do you see people take advantage of it like every day? Do you see some of the same people
Absolutely.
for 3 hours
Yeah.
a day?
Yeah. So, I mean, like for starters, none of the kids are required to be there. They're there because they want to be there. And actually, it was a few years ago, but we asked this wide open question to all of our kids, which was, what's the most significant change that you've experienced as a reason of participating in this program? And you'd expect like just myriad of different kinds of responses. What we ended up getting back was over half of the responses had something to do about relationships. Either it was that they had a new friendship, or they had improved friendships, or they had a new adult friendships, or improved adult friendships and things like that. And so it was a very strong reminder, is like, okay, the reason kids are really here is because they're wanting to have good relationships. And so long as we focus on that, everything else will fall in line. And we really do lean into those relationships, because then when we have to get to the things that, like, certain kids really don't like math, but sometimes it really is, not sometimes, but it's really necessary to learn. And so we can lean on that relationship and help those kids overcome those challenges, that, those mental barriers that they might have of anxiety or stress, or, lack of confidence. And we can help get them through that and get those small wins that turn into bigger wins over time.
And these enrichment classes happen at the different community centers throughout
Yep.
the area?
Yeah, so at 6 of our 7 community centers.
Mm-hmm. And talk about the community center in general. I mean, is it used for more than these enrichment classes? What is the purpose of them?
Yeah, so the community centers, in kind of the most basic form, is a hub of resources. So you could really go into almost every neighborhood and find some pretty common needs. Childcare is always one of those. And so after school programs and educational summer camps, if so long it's like, neighborhoods that have families in it, is always going to be a big hit. Food security is always a high need. And so we've always recognized that as a staple. And just in general, housing stabilization, like the eviction prevention, utility shutoff prevention needs, is also a critical resource that we found in pretty much every community that we've operated in. And so we've just known that those are just core services that any community, or at least most communities, would want to have. But then we take it several steps further. So one of which is CAN has been doing more in relation to environmental sustainability. So when the city announced that they were kicking off the A20 initiative, I had CAN signed up literally, I think, the same day to become a sponsor on that, largely because I recognize that our families are very rarely at the table when big decisions are being made, and knowing that climate change has a disproportionate impact on under-resourced families, it just made a lot of sense to get on that and just make sure to hopefully channel resources in directions that really truly impact under-resourced families. And we've been making some substantial headway on that front in a couple different ways. So, for example, the Ann Arbor Housing Commission announced that they're adding solar to several of their public housing sites. We've actually created the first resiliency hub in Washtenaw County, and that's at Northside Community Center. We're actually in the process of creating the second resiliency hub at Bryant Community Center. For context on that, resiliency hubs, they're basically a lot of solar with batteries on site, with the intent that if the grid goes down, that the power stays on. And both of those sites serve the county in terms of food distribution and resources. And so there's also this element that can really, and it really came to the forefront during the pandemic, where in a crisis, we're an agency that steps up. We're an agency that is also positioned in a way that can truly help the community in very meaningful ways. And so making sure that, for example, our refrigeration stays up and running is also a very important aspect to our operations. So then, and this is extremely hot off the press, as in yesterday, we've been working for about a year and a half now with the City of Ann Arbor Office of Sustainability and Innovations, Elevate, U of M, and a few other partners. And we have been doing this pretty thorough documentation and processing, specifically of the Bryant neighborhood, to understand what would it take to make the neighborhood become carbon neutral. And so we've been doing dozens of energy assessments. We've had solar assessments of the entire neighborhood done. There's a lot of other technical things that frankly are just out of my pay grade as well that I'm involved in. And we finally reached a point where we could start to pursue funding to start actualizing that plan. Well, just yesterday, we secured $500,000 to actually start actualizing some of that plan, which will put a pretty big dent in the work that we're hoping to do. And it's providing a direct benefit here in Washtenaw County to our families to not only make their homes more carbon neutral, but also building up intergenerational wealth, improving the comfort, the affordability of the homes that would be affected as well, and starting to see come to fruition some really genuine and impactful environmental sustainability work in our communities.
Does the organization do anything to help people that are in need of housing or, rent assistance or even finding a job?
So in terms of housing, we're not a housing provider. So, obviously there is like a lot of benefits in terms of specializing in like most things that we do. And so, for example, we have some excellent housing providers like Ann Arbor Housing Commission, Avalon Housing are two of great partners of ours that are really good in understanding how to actually develop and leverage resources to create affordable housing in our community. So CAN is hyper focused on the support services side of things. And so, for example, if somebody's housing is becoming tenuous, and it's not always actually financial, most often it tends to not even be financial that we encounter, which is that there's some other kind of community issue that is jeopardizing their housing. Sometimes it's community conflict with their neighbor, or just some other obligation that's just not being fulfilled, and we can be that neighbor essentially to be able to help navigate those challenges and troubleshoot them before they reach a point of impasse as well.
Do you need volunteers, and what do volunteers do?
Yeah, so I mean, we plug in volunteers in all sorts of ways. There's certainly volunteers with our after school programs. That tends to be our biggest need for volunteers. One of our particularly at our Bryan Community Center location, they're sometimes looking for volunteers. We have some upcoming events like the holiday parties, as I mentioned, and we're always looking for sponsors of those events where sometimes we have a congregation or a company that is got 12 staff, and they're like, okay, we're going to throw you guys a party. We're going to bring the food, we're going to serve the food, and you guys focus on the rest. And so there's like those kinds of partnerships that happen. And so at the end of the day, anybody that we have interested, I always connect with our director of volunteers, and we always have a slew of options available.
Well, before we go, why don't you tell people how and why they should support CAN?
Thanks. So, I mean, for starters, like I've been doing this for 14 years, and it's certainly not for the money. It's very much so about the impact. I've worked in a lot of different types of environments, and hands down have never felt more useful in my life doing the work that I'm doing. And, a big part of it is that our model not only being neighborhood based, and we're working with families over periods of time, over that time, we actually see those successes, where oftentimes a lot of interventions or supports are kind of like a flash in the pan. You interact with them once, and then you hope everything went well after that point. For us, we're working with those families so long as they're in our communities. And I've been around long enough to see, kids that I thought like were on a track to 100% be arrested or put in prison or what have you, graduating college now, or like already on to their professions and things like that. And seeing like, all the little things that happened over that time that really added up in a big ways as well. And just even seeing the transformation in our communities of like safety in particular, and just seeing, for several of our neighborhoods that didn't even like CAN's involvement didn't even exist up until a point, and then seeing what it was then and all the way to it's now. So just know that like those contributions, those supports 100% have a very big impact, and you see it every day.
Well, I want to thank you, Derrick, for being a guest on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
For more on this and other programs, visit a2gov.org/CTN. Visit youtube.com/CTN Ann Arbor to see all that we have to offer. And remember to like, subscribe, and ring that notification. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time to FYI.